Hello, Artist Forge family, and welcome to another Monday edition of the Artist Forge Live. My name is Nicole York. I'm not only your host, I'm a complete disaster, and joining me today is another complete disaster with way better hair, Becca Bjorky. Welcome to Squad Disaster.
Go team.
Woo! So first of all, if you're hanging out with us today on Facebook or in YouTube land, we encourage you guys to say hi. Hanging out with you is the main reason we get together on Mondays. So make sure you say hi. We can share that in the comments. If you are on Facebook, remember you do have to give StreamYard wow. I lost all my words. You do have to give StreamYard permission to share your name if you would like your name to be shared in the comments. But if not, just say hi and we will say hi back. I want to know how your weekend was and how life has been going. It's been a little while since we have been together here. So how about you, Becca? What was your weekend like?
This is one of those moments of, do you want the honest answer or the socially acceptable recorded on the internet forever answer?
I never want the socially acceptable answer.
I admittedly had like kind of a rough day on Saturday. I kind of had a panic attack, and that was a thing. But yeah, yesterday was chill. It snowed, and so the youngest kid, has been pretty excited about that. So that was my weekend.
I'm sorry. Panic attacks are the worst. I've been in a similar boat. I've been deep in anxiety land for the last, I don't know, couple weeks. But my, and I don't know if that influenced having an upset stomach or if having an upset stomach was the resulting in anxiety. But for whatever reason, I've just been having a lot of indigestion and a lot of stomach pain. And so that if anybody who likes to eat as much as I like to eat knows that like being able to, or having to remove some of that stuff from your life is like, not, I mean, it's gut wrenching, like not to be kind of punny for my situation, but you do. That's really bright. You're like, it just makes life worse when you can't have yummy food. So I was very sad. But then, and this is going to sound really weird, I just decided to be happy. So like, I have a tendency, as many people with anxiety do, to catastrophize. And it makes everything worse, obviously. And I happened across, there was, I think it was a rabbi, and he was essentially saying, he was like, look, if you've ever been depressed or sad before and you eat ice cream, you're still experiencing pleasure. Like that ice cream is pleasurable, but it doesn't pull you out of your sadness. Like you can have pleasure and sadness at the same time. And vice versa, you can be happy and have pain at the same time. So your physical circumstances don't have to dictate your mental and emotional circumstances. You can allow them to, but they don't have to. And I remember thinking that and being like, well, I only have, like, no matter what, I only have so much time on this earth in general. Why am I going to choose? Why would I choose at all not to be happy? And it's not as if like those feelings of happiness that come from circumstance, like I can't manufacture those, right? But I can choose not to dwell or allow my present circumstances to control me, I guess. So that has made a really big difference in my outlook, I think, over just the last couple days. So we'll see if it lasts.
I mean, that's a win. That's a win. And like there is that, like you said, like the ice cream is still giving you that pleasure. Like there is a biological aspect to combating even clinical depression that way, right? That's like, even if you go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and if they recommend, go and exercise, and you think, screw you, I don't want to exercise, I'm depressed. But there is going to be that physical, actual scientific element that's going to help alleviate some of those feelings. So the more you can chase that dopamine high with ice cream or running or whatever it is, like every little bit counts.
Yeah. And it's hard because you think, especially when you're in those like, screw you, I don't want to exercise, I can't even get out of bed kind of things. Like it doesn't make it very easy for that to even feel like something that's possible.
Yeah.
So I think just starting up here made a difference. So I don't know. We'll see. But yeah. Thumbs up for the mental health spicy crew. The neuro spicy crew. if you are watching today, how was your weekend? What is going on with you? How are things shaping up for you right now? We want to know. Give us the lowdown on your life. And if you have anything interesting that's happening, we're always like super curious to hear, because the art world is in such turmoil right now. I feel like everything that's happening, there's a lot to think about and a lot to talk about. So I want to know what people are doing. I've seen some really cool projects coming about. I've seen some really great discussions happening, and I don't remember anything being this tumultuous since like forever.
It's wild. It's wild. Like, I'm almost sick of hearing about it and talking about it. I mean,
It's like a presidential election cycle. Shut up.
It is. It is, but it's literally everywhere. And like seeing like companies and stuff having to actually respond to plebeian drama, I suppose. Like, I think it was like Clip Studio Paint or something, like canceled their AI integration to their software that they'd announced, and it was a very mixed reviews. Like, a lot of people were like, thank you for, you know, being an ethical company, I love you, and other people were like, damn it, I was really looking forward to that. But the fact that it's rising beyond the online social media discourse and arguments to having actual impact on businesses and stuff is interesting.
Yeah, it is. I noticed I was putting together a quick promo for one of my books this morning, and I noticed Canva now has an integration as well. And I was like, oh, dang. Okay. So I don't know what that is going to look like, but I'm sure along with everything else, there's going to be some pushback and some excitement. So even Canva jumping into the game, and I don't know what that will mean for a lot of the stock photographers who license their stuff through Canva, or like, you know, which is, it's interesting because it's obviously still a human made and a human run program, but things like Canva have absolutely squeezed graphic designers out of a lot of the kind of lower end spaces where they would have been before. And that's an interesting argument that I have seen kind of across the board. I don't know if you knew, a few weeks ago, Z Library was taken down by the US government. So Z Library was a huge online library of pirated books, just all kinds of pirated books from all over the world, everything from academic books all the way to, you know, like fanfic and stuff. It just was a whole bunch of pirated stuff. And a lot of people would go there to read everything. And so the US government seized it, shut it down. There was, of course, authors all over the place who were celebrating, like, thank goodness, and readers who were very angry. And they were like, I wasn't going to buy your book anyway. So you didn't lose anything except that now I can't read it and share it with other people. And then, of course, there was the discussion about would somebody have done it anyway? Like, would they have bought your book anyway? And I've heard people say a similar kind of a story as it pertains to the AI stuff. They're like, look, I wasn't going to commission you anyway. So you're not losing anything by me doing this Lensa thing, or by me, you know, using Midjourney or whatever it is that people are going to do. They're like, you weren't losing anything anyway, because I can't afford to hire you and I wasn't going to. This is just fun. So it's interesting that that seems to be like the bottom level argument, is like, all of the folks who were charging just enough already have kind of been squished out. But places like Canva were doing that to artists already. And
I saw a post from someone on my Facebook friends list, actually, that was exactly on that I thought was interesting. So they posted like, hey, I don't want to support, you know, AI programs and pay for Lensa. I think it's like a couple bucks, right, to pay for it. I don't know.
Like something a month, $8 or $12 or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
And so they're like, but I can only afford that much. So if any of my artist friends could do a commission that looks like this for me for $5 to $10, I'd love to pay you for it.
Right.
And I mean, like, I can support their feelings on the technology. That's fine. But then I'm also like, $5 to $10 for a commission. And I know lots of people do that, but I wouldn't even want to. Like, I mean, I feel like it's worth it. Like, if that is what you can afford and what you value a piece of artwork at, I think it is reasonable to find an alternative than, you know, valuing, especially a friend or someone you know's time at $2.50 an hour or whatever.
Yeah. And I wonder, that does make me wonder. And I know even in this conversation as a whole, we've kind of used food as like a corollary, but it does make me wonder. I mean, nobody makes the McDonald's burgers, right? Like somebody made the buns in a factory, somebody made the meat in a factory, it all gets shipped somewhere. And then there's just somebody who puts it together. Somebody
Sure.
eats that for a couple bucks, they enjoy it, fills up their belly. People do that and still go and pay $50 a plate or $100 a plate for a chef who makes everything from scratch. We do have both, and both industries still survive. Now, to be fair, when stores like McDonald's came along, all of the lowest end got squished out by the kind of industrialization of making your food. That didn't stop the top percentages from still existing, even if they're only marginally better. I mean, you can spend a little bit at McDonald's or a tiny bit more at Denny's, or you can go to a bakery, or you can, you know what I mean? Like there's obviously levels there, and those things don't stop existing because some really cheap food exists. Of course, the difference being that AI, the quality levels are commensurate with quite a high level of technical skill, right? Because I've seen some that are crazy looking with wonky eyes and 8 million fingers. And I've seen some that I would not have been able to distinguish from a traditional artist.
Yeah.
And so like that, I think changes the equation a little bit, because you're not going to go to McDonald's and get, you know, like a really fantastic steak. So I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I feel
It's
like my
hard.
end all be all like conclusion is complaining about it does nothing.
Yeah.
Like
That's
everyone's
fair.
you got to grapple with your feelings personally and pivot or adapt or don't. You know?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, so I think the thing, which I know this is gonna show up for authors as well. Already, some copywriters and other people are in the crosshairs for AI writing,
Mhm.
but I think the only way that your complaining means anything is if you're taking meaningful action to organize and then to go get things done. So if
Yes.
you're mad about it, you can't just expect you pulling your dollars away from something as an individual to make much difference. Here's the sucky thing. Okay, I'm scooting away a little bit from art and going into like governance for a second, but hopefully I'll segue back into it. But we have been told by people in power that we can vote with our money, which is a lie. Because the only way that works is if huge amounts of us come together and vote with our money all at once and for a long enough period of time to affect somebody's bottom line. A lot of people have a lot of money invested in this process of getting AI to be a thing that's usable. And so we would like to think, now I may feel personally good about my decision to not engage if I feel like it is an immoral thing to do, but I still have no overall effect on the industry at all. So for my complaining to mean anything, I have to get a lot of people together. I have to move as a group. We have to be able to affect the bottom line like decently enough to cause change. And then we have to manage that for a sustained amount of time so that we actually affect laws that could get put in place or regulations that get put in place or whatever. Otherwise, there's like you said, you're literally just screaming into the void to vent your feelings and vent your spleen, and no actual change comes of
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I'm very pro screaming. Definitely.
It feels good.
Well, no, like get mad, and like
Mhm.
relating it to governance, I think is apt, right? I mean, it's very easy to be upset about governmental policies or the state of the world or society or whatever, but if you're screaming into the void, that's very different than screaming at someone else who actually makes an impact or using those screams to take that action like you described. So I don't know particularly what that means in the case of AI. I you know, if there are regulations, if there do have to be legalities involved, like okay, if that makes society and the art industry better, like okay, great. Um but yeah, with purpose
With purpose.
instead of stewing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and if there's enough of an outcry, the question then becomes, can you weather the storm, or is this just going to be a drop in the bucket? And I think we see this a lot of times with social issues. Something will happen, everybody will get mad. There'll be a big outcry across all kinds of social spaces. And if we don't hang on to the outcry long enough, the next thing that's interesting comes along, our interest dies off, and then the people doing the thing just get to keep doing the thing. So there has to be something sustained and purposeful about that for any changes need to be made. So I feel like for the folks who are really against this thing, we will have to see like purposeful, sustained, long-term action for any changes to take place. And even then, I don't see this going away. I mean, I think
it's not going to go away.
Bottom 50% of artists are still going to be really negatively affected unless they can find ways to communicate with their audiences the value beyond. And we've talked about this before, but like your value has to exist beyond purely the technical skills that you're capable of. So maybe I can render a painting. That's nice. Obviously, AI can do that too. So what makes mine different or worth more or worth investing in? And I think that's the main dividing line.
Have you seen, I mean, in the like the loudness of the void screaming that exists, have you seen any proposed actions?
Zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the only thing I've seen is people saying don't do it, like support living artists, don't do it. But even in that, the conversations are really interesting because unfortunately, a lot of people misunderstand the way that the algorithms in these things perform. They literally think you're just taking 5 pictures and smushing them together and being like, look, it's this, I stole somebody's art and put you're training. Okay, that's not how it works. Anyway, we don't have to get into that. They need to do actually a little bit more research to understand the way that this stuff performs. But
that's an interesting thing. Do people need to do more research? Because I feel like personally, in disaster neurosis land, I like to know how things work. But I realize a lot of people don't. And honestly, they don't care. They've got so many brain cells and so many spoons to use in a day, and they don't need to go. But I do feel like those attitudes, and especially seeing them trend like in a viral way, is what's the word I want? I don't say unhealthy, but like, well, it's like kind of misinformation, like it's
that's exactly. Yeah. If you're shaming other people for doing something for a reason that is not right, I think that's kind of because people who do think that what's happening is, I can understand saying you are training this to think using information that doesn't belong to you. That is valid, right? Mm-hmm. But saying then it is plagiarism is not by any stretch of the imagination plagiarism. It's looking at, as an example, it's looking at 8 million faces. And it's essentially thinking to itself, when this line starts, it almost always ends in this way. And it's connected to these words describing this kind of face, which means if the information says 3/4 profile of a beautiful woman, in every 3/4 profile of a beautiful woman, this line starts here and it ends like this, and it's always connected to a circle that has a dot in the middle, it will replicate that and then test it against its own filters and say, does this look like an eye? Nope, it doesn't look like an eye. Okay, try again. Does this look like an eye? Looks like an eye. Okay, faces have eyes. Like that's essentially what the program is doing. It's not literally just taking somebody else's art and taking those pixels and smushing them and being like, here's new things. That's not how it works. So when you do that and when you say don't use AI because this is what it's doing, you're literally just perpetuating a false narrative that isn't actually true. I think we could be a lot more effective for artists if we actually understand how the thing works. And then we can say, because I can't make you fix something that doesn't exist. But if I do come back and say, hey, you're profiting from learning from all of this information, and then your program is making things based off of information you did not have to pay for, these artists should be compensated or they should be able to opt out or whatever, that's a legitimate way to go because that's actually what's happening as opposed to the other thing, which we can't fix because it's not actually happening. Right. So it seems kind of useless to complain about. That's kind of my thoughts. I'm curious what our friends in the audience, I see you guys. I see that there are 5 of you guys. I'm really curious what you think. Share your thoughts.
Dustin saying hi.
That was who?
Dustin.
Hi, Dustin.
Dustin and I have had many AI conversation in the last couple of weeks, actually.
Yeah.
it's been a topic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing.
I had a backtrack thought though when you were talking about Z Library, you said it was called.
Yep.
About the academic books versus like fiction books.
Right.
I mean, I don't particularly, this is the case where it's like, I don't know how this shit works. So I don't really know how academic publishing works. But I know that textbooks and stuff when you are in university is prohibitively
So
expensive.
Yeah.
And I have definitely been very pro piracy when it comes to, you know, textbooks and things like that. And like I have shared resources or, you know, like I've read stuff myself. Like it seems scammy to me. And I don't want to feel like I'm negatively impacting these writers or scientists or whoever's livelihoods. But I also think that like capitalizing on education in that particular way, which is probably more the university's fault than the author's fault, is bullshit. So then ethically, like for myself, I'm not sure. I'm like trying to unpack this now, thinking about it. Where is the ethical line between thinking, okay, it's okay to pirate a $600 college textbook versus it's not okay to pirate, you know, a fanfic by an indie author? Are they different or are they not different?
Right. Well, I mean, I think we have to look at things like purpose. Obviously, one is for entertainment and the other is for education. But I think that leads back to exactly what we were just talking about, which is we actually have to pinpoint the real source of the problem. And the source of the problem in this case is the for-profit education where there is no other option. Like your option is either for-profit education or YouTubeversity, right? And authors often will give people many options. Not only do we do things like look for beta readers, we give away free books. We obviously put books in libraries, which is a free option for folks. There's many options available for you to be able to go get fiction books, to be entertained, to escape the world, all of that kind of stuff. But the for-profit education system that we have right now is so predatory that the only way for a lot of people to get books like that is going through nefarious means because we don't make those things accessible. So the problem itself is not Z Library in that case. The problem itself is the education center. And we don't fix that by taking down Z Library. We fix that by going after education publishing, and you know what I mean? Like, so it seems like pinpointing the real problem is the first fix for this stuff, in which case the AI itself isn't the real problem. Capitalism is the problem, and getting things more and cheaper and faster is the problem, where we don't have any kind of appreciation for the effort, the time, etc., that goes into creating art. And so then the systems that get built in order to feed capitalism are a symptom of the problem. And I wouldn't even say like necessarily that capitalism is a problem, but maybe we should look at it as like unregulated capitalism is a problem, or capitalism with no like moral center or something is a problem. Like we can, you know, alter that a little bit, but you still have to find the root of the thing and not just treat the symptom. And for me, that makes a lot more sense than just being like, don't use this, because there's a lot. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling, but I have seen people. Tell me more. I've seen people. There are a few people I have seen now running across posts who were like, I've never been able to afford to commission an artist, but I've also always hated the way that I looked. And when I saw these from MyHeritage or from Lensa or whoever they're getting, you know, their images through, I had a fundamental change in the way that I think about how I look. And I felt for the first time like I was beautiful, like I was worth seeing, like whatever. And I had, for folks who have been with the Artist Forge for very long, if you've been here since the beginning, I took a self-portrait toward the end of our first year of the pandemic. And it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't because I wanted to take a portrait of myself. I just didn't have a model to use. Like I couldn't bring somebody into my home at that time. So I had intended to just Photoshop the shit out of my face and make myself look like whatever picture I saw in my head. But when I had finished the image and I looked at myself, it was a fundamental change. I saw in that portrait the woman, the creature, the person I dreamed about being as a little girl. And I recognized that somehow I was that person. And then luckily I'm in a place where I hired an artist to do an illustration based on that. And now that's my profile picture on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, you can go look at that. The artist name is Elena. She's amazing. But that is a fundamental change. It changes the way you think about yourself and the way that you see yourself. And people have had access to that now who maybe never would have done that in any other sense. So it's not as if there's no value being created here. For a lot of people, there really is. If you look at somebody with tears in their eyes going, oh my God, that's me. It's hard for me to want to say, yes, at all costs, this is a bad thing.
Right. I mean, that's interesting. That's almost like especially for photography, right? Like that's a very inherent part of marketing photography, is capturing someone and letting them see themselves in that new light or whatever it is that we all have probably put into our photography marketing verbatim at some point. But it's that same experience of being able to see someone and present someone in the best possible way and to elevate their own feelings about themselves through an image. And so that's interesting, taking that human marketing aspect out of it and leaving just like that core value. I could see how people are threatened by that.
Yeah.
But as a consumer, that's wonderful.
Right. Right. Like when you saw these ones, especially the ones that are kind of fantasy based, right? Did you immediately think of all the fantasy photographers you knew who would be threatened by this kinds of thing? Like I thought of all these fantasy photographers who that's their specialty. You show up, they put you in a fantastic gown, they do the hair, they put flowers in your hair, they do everything. And then at the end, you have this beautiful portrait of yourself. And then people are getting something similar very, very quickly for super cheap. And I wondered, like, is this going to be a threat?
I don't think to photographers. And I know just from having done fantasy portrait sessions myself, the experience of becoming is absolutely what people are paying for beyond the final image. Because I've done, fantasy editing of people's like selfies and stuff too. And, that's a thing that is something easily replaceable then by apps like this. And okay. But the full experience, I think, especially with photography, is like that, the having your hair done, the having your makeup on, getting to wear these clothes that you don't actually own and you never would wear. Like, where else would you wear this fantasy gown and these giant golden wings with flowers in your hair? I mean, I'm pro wearing them everywhere, but like, where are you really going to do that?
Right.
There's so much more to it than just the final image. And of course, then you do get these variations, probably, or have the option to purchase variations of the photos. It's more than just the final output. And so I think in the case of like photographers, I absolutely did not think of fantasy photographers seeing these images at all, because I don't feel like what they do and what they give to their clients is threatened by this.
That's such a great point. And you actually made me think of, so I heard somebody talk about the fall of Toys R Us, and I promise this brings us back to the point. This ties into Barnes and Noble and some other things too, but Amazon obviously has decimated the book industry in a lot of ways, in part, obviously, because you have access to like almost every book that's ever existed. And if you walk into a bookstore, they can only carry so many books. But Amazon cannot replace the smell of a bookstore and the smell of pages and ink and coffee and the sound of books and people chatting and the ambience and everything. And somebody talked about the fact that the mistake that Toys R Us made was that they didn't change the feeling. Like they didn't make going to the toy store an experience. Like you can buy your kid toys on Amazon. If you take them to the toy store, the kid is going to be grabbing stuff and crying. They want to get out of the cart. They want to take the thing. They're mad. There's lines, like all of this stuff, right? They didn't recognize that if somebody can buy their toys from Amazon and from wherever else, you have to make the experience of going to a toy store something enjoyable to go do. Like you want to go there and be there, right? And book lovers, we won't ever give up our favorite bookstores. Like we want to go be in the bookstore and we want to have a coffee and we want to sit with our book and we want to, just the whole thing of being in a bookstore is great. So relating that to photographers and what they're giving to their clients and that experience, like you said, that is a huge part of making that art. And so I can absolutely see how a photographer would be less interrupted or less affected by things like this than maybe a digital artist who you're sending me a few portraits of yourself that you like, and I'm recreating something for you, which you could now maybe get much faster. And it's not perfect, but we've talked about before that 50% or more of the population can't tell the difference between good and great. They just, they don't train themselves to see that. And that's not like to be mean to these people. That's just saying artists are training their eye every single day. The average consumer is just taking in things that they like. They're not looking at, oh, this eye is a little bit higher than that one, or, you know, a finger is too long. They don't notice that stuff. We notice that stuff. That's our job to do that. So for those folks, it could be a hit that doesn't come back. So what would they have to do in order to make the value of what they do more than just you getting the thing? Like, how do us digital artists make that an experience for people that matters more than here's 5 photos of me, give me 150 fantasy pictures of myself, you know?
Attention to detail, understanding the client. Yeah.
Go, continue, go.
No, I mean, that's really it. Like, I mean, you can get such cool looking stuff out of these image generators. Like, some of it is so cool. Oh my God, it's so cool. Like, it just looks, I mean, you see this one, like when you say like study like design, right? Or like concept design. And like, there's kind of like this rule of cool that exists. Like, yes, you want to think of all the logistics for why something looks the way it does.
The cool rules, right?
Yeah, cool rules. Like, yeah, this makes all this sense, and this is all the research, and these are all the art rules that we're following. But sometimes something just looks cool, and that's great. So you have to like kind of find this balance when you are designing or illustrating or whatever it is that you do between like this makes sense and this just looks awesome, even if it doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of like the stuff, AI image generation right now, it's still just a baby, which is maybe even more frightening. But I mean, it's still baby, right? Like, you know, it's not super high, like high resolution. Like there's ways to get around that, but you know, like fine details, those fine little Easter egg kind of like minute details that make hiring an illustrator so valuable are not there. Does it look good? Yes. But it really kind of depends, you know, what is it that you can do to elevate that for a client? Like if you want to get their life story, if they want a portrait of themselves and they, you know, have mentioned that they like kids or they mentioned their favorite book or like whatever, it's all these little things that you can pick up about a person and include into that self-portrait or, you know, portrait of them rather, are going to make it more valuable. The fact that you listen, that you're available to answer their questions and fix things and iterate things is valuable. If you're designing, like I know concept art land is just like a mess. People are so worried about being replaced because there's just so much cool looking concept art looking stuff that comes out of AI. But it doesn't have the functionality that you would get from an actual artist putting in their brain power. Does it look great? Yes. Is it good enough to hand off to an art director to review? Probably. Like it looks okay, but it doesn't have all the minute detail that you get from like a full brief, from reading a script, from reading someone's book. That's not there. And that's something that you need to hire an artist for. Now, theoretically in the future, I don't know. But, you know, at least for me, like I'm comfortable and confident in my ability to provide what my clients want and like to create value by being a human person and understanding their needs and being able to give them feedback if things work or don't work or reasons why. And that's something a machine can't currently do.
Right. So I think that's, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think that that's a really big deal in trying to establish how we connect with our audience, how we establish our value, how we communicate our value going forward. Is we have gone past the stage at which the skill itself is the main value of what we do. And we've got to go beyond that into why we are of value to work with somebody, whether that's, you know, our deep understanding of the genre or our ability to communicate or making the process a really enjoyable one or understanding you deeply, whatever, you know, whatever it is. And it's interesting as well, because there are a lot of artists who they have absolutely rabid communities. And it's obviously because their art is fantastic, but it's also because of who these artists are. And people want to support them because of who they are. And I have a couple artists like that I follow where I will just get something from them any chance I can because I love them. And then I have artists that I have found their work and it's really unique and it fits my vision for something. And so I will pay them. I mean, I'm about to lay down close to $2,000 for book covers here pretty soon for like 5 books with an artist that I love their style. I love the way that they work. I love the line control, and there's just certain things I really love about that. So I will go work and save my money to hire that person because of what they do. Could there be an AI art that replicates that style?
Probably.
Yeah, but it won't have, like you said, the little subtle details that this artist puts into their work. It won't be them that has done that. So
you see the flip side of that too. And I think that works, for people who don't want to utilize technology like this. Like, there are artists out there, I think their art looks great. I do not like their personality that they put out into the world.
It's true, yeah.
And that age-old kind of problem is like, how do you separate the art from the artist? Like, if anyone wants something topical to go delve into the internet, like, look at people who are still trying to support Kanye West right now.
Right.
But you see this a lot, and it's like kind of, again, that ethical line. Where do you draw that line for yourself? If you draw it. A lot of people don't. A lot of people still just like art that looks a certain way and they don't care who made it. And that's okay because that's them as an individual. But so that, again, also is going to come into play, whether it's hiring an artist or using an app, whatever. Those personal ethics and what you value are going to make that decision. And that's completely individualized.
Yeah, that's true. I read, I think it was Seth Godin who said this essentially, you just need 1,000 fans. Like, that's really actually all you need to make a living off of your art is 1,000 fans. And I think even with the advent of things like AI, I still think that we're capable of that. Like with paying attention to our marketing and our outreach and making sure our messaging is on point and all of that kind of stuff. I still think that we're capable of that. Now, of course, that comes down to our business models, right? Like 1,000 people who spend 99 cents a month is not maybe going to get us through a month. So we have to consider what things are worth, which obviously makes the messaging really important and how we market them and account for the cost of them. But the other thing I thought was really interesting was somebody mentioned how big entertainment is going to be in more trouble than anybody else in the long run, because pretty soon you're not going to need like 700 skilled artisans in order to make a movie. You or I are going to be able to do that through 7 different apps. And we're going to be able to bring our own vision for the Lord of the Rings or for, whatever we can afford to license, even if that's like going back to Pinocchio and stuff that's in the commons. But, we're going to be able to go do those things ourselves. And instead of one big company or 2 big production companies controlling the vision for this thing, you're now going to have hundreds and hundreds of smaller artists with just the passion and the, oomph to stay with it, be able to make these things. And all of a sudden we're just going to see the democratization all the way on a small scale of being able to do stuff like that. And I mean, that's a good possibility.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that during our big roundtable chat, specifically within the context of filmmaking, on things that like are really cost prohibitive,
right?
Like filmmaking. Kill me. But I mean, there also then, are the questions of like how does this democratized art get distributed?
Mm-hmm.
And what are people's goals? Are they monetary, make a living goals? Are they purely artistic goals? Or are things even just like personal? Like, one thing I think I read about someone's experience, like, but basically being able to create like shared dream states or shared realities through AI that they can then very intimately share with a friend or a lover, whoever it is, where it's something private, right? Which I think is like a trip, really cool trip. The idea that you can just generate ideas that are in your head that you don't have the ability to create, and then you can personally share them with someone and create this like really interesting form of like digital intimacy.
Right.
or even, I mean, I think what we'll probably see in the not too distant future on like social media is like things, I mean, we see it already with like our social media feeds being algorithmic, right? And so like it's giving us what we think, what it thinks we want to see, mostly in advertising, or sometimes it's content or videos or pictures. But once the technology reaches the point where it can generate what it has determined we want to see through into something like a full movie or
Mhm.
like fully generative art, I think that's going to be very, very interesting. And I do think that is the future of our online presence. Whether that is something I want to experience, I'm not entirely sure. It's again that kind of like, is capitalism the root of the problem? If what I'm experiencing that is generated to my tastes by a large giant company, I don't know if I want that. But if it is something generated to my tastes by someone whose taste I also appreciate and who has interesting ideas that I want to be like experience from them, like an artist, that I'm more interested in. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know what that landscape's going to look like in probably a year or 5 years or God, even 10 years. Who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows?
I don't know. That's really interesting to think about. And it seems like the problem in that case is still the same problem that we face now, which is, well, how do we get in front of those people? Or how do we get those people in front of us? Yeah. And I think the one thing, and I know I talked about this before, but I think the one thing I'm worried most about is, and I don't know if this is a legitimate worry or not, but in social spaces where the algorithm only gives us the things that we want to see, we have the danger of creating and having these biases reinforced, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm kind of afraid that the same thing will happen via art.
Totally.
Like, I will not see art that challenges me anymore, or art that I don't like, or art that makes my stomach just twist up and I have to go, whoa, wait a minute, why am I having this reaction? Like, why is it doing this to me? And break those things down and try to understand that stuff. So it separates us from that a little bit. But also it kind of makes me think about the fact that before these higher, I'm using the term higher art form just because they take a long time and a lot of money to make. Because even at like oil painting at the time, you have to know the techniques, you have to have all of the equipment, you have to be able to have enough stuff to practice for long enough that you get good at it, all of that stuff. So it's prohibitive for most people. What did we have before that time? We had a really highly democratized, very personal art forms that were highly community and culturally based, like the types of weaving that you would do, the stories that were told around the fire, like all of the folk art and the folk tales and all of those things, right? Were very much community based, and it was what you had access to. And I wonder if once we get to the point where everybody has so much access, we'll start to see this splintering again of like, being able to dip into small different pots for these highly centralized forms. I don't know if that's making as much sense in my head as what I'm probably not communicating it very well.
No,
but
it does make sense. But I think it again kind of goes back to that, what is the threat? The threat is on people's wallets.
Right. So, I mean, I think a lot of artists maybe have a question to answer for themselves is, am I going to quit?
Like, no.
Well, I mean, no, that's the point, right? So there was an author who was just sharing their feelings, because publishing is a really highly intimidating industry to get into, just because of the wealth of books that there are and the difficulty in reaching enough people. Because I can make far more on one piece of art than I can on one book over a certain period of time. Like, you might pay me $1,200 to make a piece of art for you. It's going to take me a year to earn that on a book. You know what I mean? So like, there's big differences there. But so if you can sell a lot of books, then things shift, right? Then you're making 6 figures, 7 figures, whatever. The point is, getting in front of that amount of people is really difficult to do. So this gal was just talking about the difficulties of trying to make it in the publishing world, and how intimidating that is, and the fear of working for a year or more on a piece of intellectual property and putting it out into the world and nobody reading it and nobody caring, and just everything that goes along with that. And I had to respond with like, okay, well then, so what are you going to do? Are you going to quit? Like, is the fear of not being successful enough to stop you? If it is, you probably shouldn't be doing this, because chances are you're not going to be successful right away. You have to care about what you're doing more than you care about profiting for it for long enough that you're willing to stick it out even when it doesn't look like you're going to make it. And I think most of us as artists have encountered this at some point where we were making art and we were putting it on Instagram, we're putting it on our website, and we're shouting into the void and we're telling the whole world, and we've spent hours training and hours making, and we're trying to mark, we're using all the hashtags and nobody seems to care, and we got 5 likes, and it just feels like we are never going to get over the hump of people finding us and paying for what we make. And if it was purely to make money, if we said to ourselves, if I can't guarantee I'm going to be successful, I'm not going to do this, then it's the wrong field to be stepping into. But if we can say, I would keep doing this even if I had to work a different job and do this on the side, even if I had to whatever, then I don't know that there's anything that can come for you at that point, like
fight me, world.
Fight me. People are still making furniture by hand, despite the fact that factories can make really great furniture really fast. We are still buying it. Now, are there as many people making it by hand as there were before factories came along? Nope. It destroyed an entire profession. But the folks who were like, screw you, I'm not stopping, they still have customers. So maybe that's a question we just have to ask ourselves. Like, if I'm walking into this field and I can't guarantee I'm going to be successful, is it still worth doing?
Yeah. I mean, that even goes back to your kind of community, ancient art forms sort of thought too. I mean, like, is it for community? Is it for joy? Is it for that human need to make something? Or does your joy only come from financial success?
Right.
And I mean, I guess for some people, like, that's okay. That's what drives you. That's fine. But I know for me, that's not it. Like, I was doing this before I made a goddamn dollar. Like, I keep doing this after I'm retired. Like,
you're drawing pictures with crayons as a little kid, right? After, like, and that's such an important thing to think about, is like, so this is a compulsion. I don't make money off this stuff, right? I just make it because I need to make it, because I need to do something with my hands and hold something and be like, I did this. And
that's actually, I mean, there's kind of like, did you have this experience with whatever art form where like eventually someone's like, hey, you could make money with this?
Yes.
Okay. So I know this is super common, right? Like, that happens to so many people. And then you're like, wow, I can make money with
Would you take pictures of my family?
Whoa.
Well, maybe I could.
Like, it did occur to me, like, as a kid, like, I wanted to be a photojournalist for National Geographic. As a small child, I definitely wasn't thinking about a career. I was thinking about the fact that I wanted to travel all over the world and see cool animals and meet interesting people.
Right.
The money part of that want was not part of that desire. And it wasn't then, until I was older, when people were like, wow, you should think about, being a professional. You should think about opening a studio, that I was like, oh, this is a job, like a job. Whoa. And I feel like a lot of people have had that experience, right? And it's not until someone makes that suggestion to you that money enters the mental equation. And I'm curious if anyone out there in the comments yelling at each other, I see you, Kelly and Dustin, if you guys had that experience too, like if it was just purely for joy, and then outside influence is what made you push for something more.
Yeah. Answer that in the comments. Answer that question in the comments. I can say words. I think that's a really great question. And it's interesting because and I know we've talked about this in the Artist Forge before, but we get our fulfillment from so many different things, and we have to understand where that's coming from. Like, it's absolutely legitimate to walk into art and say, I'm doing this because it's profitable. Like, I choose to do this because it's a profitable business. Totally legitimate reason to make things. Absolutely. Go ahead and do that. Plenty of photographers who happen to stumble across really great systems for portraits or for whatever and say, hey, this looks really viable. Like, these people are doing well. I want to make money. I'm going to do this to make money. That's sure. Go do that thing for sure. However, when circumstances make that less viable, and that's then the question you have to ask yourself is it still worth doing anyway? If it's less viable, is it still worth doing anyway? And I got into big trouble. I got into big trouble when I was writing for F-Stoppers because I essentially said this to moms. I was like, you don't have to turn your photography into a business. You don't have to do that. You're a legitimate photographer just doing it on the side. And admittedly, the way that I put that may have stoked some fires. But I said kind of very clearly, like from a mom's perspective, like you don't have to go do this. You don't have to go be a business person and feel that pressure that takes the joy out of the thing that you're doing. You're still a legitimate photographer if you choose not to do that. The same is true for art. Like, I'm not a less legitimate artist if I don't choose to make a business out of my art. Granted, maybe not all of us are super suited anymore to working for other people, so that may become a problem for us.
Doctor. That actually. Okay, this is a whole other tangent rant.
Do it.
Okay, so mentioning like the momtographer thing, right? I know I have witnessed this from other women, and I experienced this myself in my first marriage, where you have pressure from your spouse for your hobby to make money. Especially photography is expensive, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be, but then you get your camera, and then you want to get full frame camera, and then you want to get new glass, and then yeah. So when you have a partner who is not supportive or maybe not artistic, so they don't get it, and that's okay, but they feel like it's only worth investing in that joy for yourself. If you are getting a return on that investment through money, that pressure is even higher. And I've seen that a lot, specifically through mothers.
Right.
Over and over and over and over again. And I'm sure other artists, we experience that in similar ways, whether it's our parents or, our boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever it is. Where there is then this pressure from the world. Even when people do that first kind of like suggestion of, hey, you could have a business, they don't see the value outside of the dollar sign.
That's a good point. And then again, the heart of that problem becomes capitalism, right? It becomes the fact that we kind of socially believe that the only value in a thing is if it gives you a return on investment. And we only think of that return on investment in terms of money. We don't think of it in terms of peace or joy or, escapism or whatever it is that these hobbies are giving us, as if those things aren't valid. Like, my husband is a golfer. His golf clubs aren't cheap. The time he spends away from home is not free. Going to a great golf course is not cheap, but it gives him peace and it makes him happy and it keeps him active and meeting, all of those things. And I don't say to him, you shouldn't be golfing unless it's also making us money. It's not a thing. You don't think about that with things like snowboarding or like other hiking or hobbies you have. Well, you better be a competitive hiker or you shouldn't be spending all that money on a backpack. Like, whoever thinks that, right? I'm assuming this is Kelly.
Yeah, that's Kelly.
Moms are always looking for a way to make money while being able to be flexible for their kids too. Totally fair.
That's true. I mean, again, this is feeding into the patriarchy. Why is it your responsibility as mom? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is true, though. I mean, like, I have the luxury of being able to work from home and make art from home and be here when my kids go to school and come back from school, or my littlest one before she was in school, I was here with her all day. But
you remember those days.
Yes. I mean, yeah, like that is very true. And it's almost always mothers who are looking for that outlet. I mean, that's a whole complex other thing about defining our value as caretaker and, walking baby bottle versus our own self as individual. Yeah, but that is true.
To be fair, you could work from home at a number of different jobs, though.
Oh, totally.
Art isn't a necessity to a flexible career, right? But I think for those of us who find ourselves drawn to art, it seems to be the only thing that makes sense. And we value ourselves based on being good at a thing, especially when you're a mom and you have somebody finally telling you, hey, you're so good at this. You're like, nobody ever tells me I'm good at anything. Like, I need this affirmation so badly,
Right?
because people don't tell you you're good at being a mom. That's just not a thing that happens. And when it does, it's so rare that it makes you want to cry, because you're like, thanks so much. It's really hard. But that's just a thing you're expected to be. And so when you get to be some other things and have an identity for yourself outside of just parenting your children, it's like, oh my God, I am a whole person. Kelly saying, I need art to feel like myself. If I can make money doing it, I will. And for sure. And then that just kind of leads us back to the original question, which is like, when you can't be guaranteed success, is it worth doing anyway? What do you get from it that makes it worth continuing to do? And I think we need to really examine this idea that we have, that if you're not making a full-time business out of something, you somehow have failed at it. Like, I can go to work and write books on the side. I can still do that. I can go work for somebody else and make stupid potion bottles that I just, like, we can still do those things and have those be legitimate. Just because they're not our full-time profession does not make them illegitimate things to do.
It's also worth noting that not all art careers are freelance careers. Like, I feel
Right.
like we've very much been talking about freelance careers because that's what you and I do.
Right.
But there are plenty of artistic or artistic adjacent careers working for other people. Those do exist out there in the world.
Yes.
They're there.
Which of course makes this conversation even more like apropos, because a lot of those jobs absolutely will be threatened. And so we have to think about that. The thing is, I think this is the first time, well, it's not the first time, obviously, photographers threatened painters, and digital artists threaten photographers, and 3D art. Like, there's always going to be disruptions in the market that you work in as technology advances. It's not like we're the first field to go through this. This has been happening. Tell me the last time you met a broom maker.
I mean, I've seen like Instagram pages for custom brooms. Does that count?
Right, but like, that used to be a thing.
Yeah.
Tell me the last time you met a cooper. Those jobs don't exist anymore, or they're so rare that the individuals who do them are the only ones left. You know what I mean? Like, that knowledge is now super rare. This is just what happens in fields. And there was absolutely probably a time when furniture makers were like, I put the love and sweat and blood of my hands into these tables. You can't just go to a factory and expect some machine to make a table as good as I can make a table with all of the attention to detail that I put into my tables.
But some people are still going to agree and be like, you're right. Here's $5,000.
My table downstairs, I hired a carpenter to make that table. Like, that is. But the point is, if you look in most of our kitchens, you're going to find factory made tables.
Yeah.
So we are not the first field to experience something like this. The question is, like, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to do something on an individual basis and something that just aligns with our values? Are we going to gather folks together and try to do something as a group so that we have more power to negotiate or force change? Are we just going to scream into the void because it makes our feelings feel better until we don't have gigs anymore? Like, what are we going to do? I'm assuming this is Kelly again. Kelly, yes. My love. I'm floored by the amount of people who have an issue with AI. I love seeing so many people feeling creative or making things they normally wouldn't be able to. I understand the concern, but let people be creative. Quality artists will still be valued.
I have a question for Kelly, because I know I saw you post. You've been making those kind of cool AI doll drawing things. They're cool. The first one I saw you post, you had said something about like, does anyone know or like have any like recommendations for how to paint fabric, if I'm remembering this correctly, because there was like some weird part on like the bow in the doll's hair. Did that motivate you to go learn something new, is my question.
We shall await the answer. I have so many references up right now, particularly from ArtStation, for some of the stuff that I'm trying to paint in my free. I'm painting a character portrait of one of my characters. She's an artificer, a dwarven artificer, and is this?
That's Isaac.
Oh,
I don't
bring
think
Kelly up.
I'm just calling her out.
Yeah, Kelly will let us know if she wants to come in. Not everybody wants everybody to see their mom hair when they're at home. But so I have so many references up right now because I need to make certain fabric or the quality of leather and the reflective light quality of leather or whatever. Like I need to know how to do those because I don't have those references in front of me. I don't have that stuff. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
And I've literally been repainting and yes, entire images. Yes.
Okay. So even though the robots did a lot of work for you, you're still taking that's creating incentive and inspiration for learning and for doing more. And I think that's fucking rad.
Agreed.
Just saying.
Agreed.
Okay, so your references, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. She's like, nope. I don't blame you. Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think we're going to constantly come across challenges to doing the things that we want, whether we had to give up a hopeful career because we had kids and we decided to stay home with our kids, or we had injuries or illnesses, whether we moved, whether our entire field got kind of crapped on by some advancement in technology. I think there's always going to be challenges to us being able to do the things that we want to do. The question just becomes, why do we do those things and how do we respond to those challenges? Do we look at them as if that is Pompeii and we're just going to sit and wait for the ash and smoke to hit us? Or do we look at this like a tidal wave and we can hop a surfboard? Like, how do we approach the challenges that are coming our way? What are our mindsets as related to those things? And that, I mean, that is absolutely going to determine how we move forward, because there are still photographers out there making tintypes and cyanotypes. And maybe you don't see their work all the time, but when 1883 came out, they sure got hired to take those movie portraits. Like that's still a thing that happens. So it's not the end. Things are going to change and things are going to morph. We might have to say goodbye to things that we're used to, but every change brings forth some new opportunity. So what are we gonna do about it? What are you gonna do about it? I mean, that's the question. I'm going to ask you that question specifically, Becca, but people are lazy. They'll still pay to create 100%. Art for them. This is true.
I'm gonna say, yeah, people are lazy. And you got $8 apps out there, free apps, stuff like that. And I will say, as digital artist who takes commissions, I have made more money in the last 2 months than like probably the last 6 months combined. So do not be afraid. There are people who want to give you money for making them art. Just saying, they're out there.
Yep. And just so that everybody knows, like, I will be shelling out a lot of money to artists over the next few months. I'm trying to hire people. Like I'm still doing that. So yes, I have AI at my disposal. I'm not paying. I'm still paying. And I'm an artist. And my mother always goes, why don't you just make those for yourself?
I don't want to, Mom.
Well, and also they're better than me at this. Like the person that I'm hiring, the things that they do, that's what I want. I don't want what I do for this. I want what they do for this. And I only have so much time in a day. And like, it's easy to say people are lazy, but people just don't have time. Mm-hmm. Not everybody even has time to make dinner from scratch, right? Like a lot of us are putting together things from boxes because we don't have time. And it's not that people can't learn how to be artists. It's that it takes a long, dedicated amount of time. And people they don't value that enough to learn that skill from scratch. The problem with people like me, I'm guessing this is in your court as well, Becca, or you're over here, is that as soon as there's an opportunity to learn a new skill, I'm like, yes.
And that's some things like, I don't want to make sushi at home all the time. Like
True.
I can't. I have done it. I'm gonna go to the sushi restaurant. Like
True. Yeah, very true.
some shit.
But I'm
Same
like, if I were to show you all of the art things, like the supplies that are hidden in all of this space around in here, like there's felting stuff and there's jewelry stuff and there's oil painting stuff and there's oil pastels and there's colored pencils and there's markers and there is everything. Like you can come in just to here and make everything, but like all of that is here is a problem I have. The result of that problem is I don't advance really, really far in anything, which means those folks who are out there, the people I am going to hire are the ones who stuck in their style, in their genre for a long time, and they're really good and they're killing the game at what they do. So am I going to give them my hard-earned money to do something I technically could learn to do for myself? Yeah, I am. I'm going to give them my money. I feel like these will turn into an inspirational tool for photographers, and photographers or other creative people won't get to replace people. Still like to do business with other people, which is something we should always, like, we bring this up all the time. People work with people work with people, but also people have styles. I will buy art from someone whose style I love as opposed to figuring it out myself. Yes.
Yep. It's like, I feel like I've seen this meme a bunch, where it's like, why spend $50 on insert object here at, Michael's when you can spend $250 on craft supplies that you'll never use again.
It's true. My husband was just saying that to me yesterday. He's like, because I was like, you know what we could make for our Christmas decorations? And he's like, why do we always have to make things? Because then you just have all of the leftover stuff that you use to make stuff that's just going to sit around. And I'm like, art supplies are never a bad investment. I will always use them again in the future at some point.
Yeah.
How long that will be down the road, I don't actually know. But still. It's gonna be for my Etsy store.
Yes, join me.
All right, everybody, we've gone over today, but it's been a really fun conversation. Thank you to everybody who joined us, Isaac and Kelly, and who else did we have today? Dustin was here. Yes, thank you to everybody for being here with us and hanging out on Monday. I know it's been a little while. You'll have to forgive me. As I have mentioned before, I'm in the middle of my hermit phase. So I'm really, really mad about sticking with any kind of deadline that is not book related right now. So Becca is keeping me on schedule. She has reminders. She's like, hey. So we're going to be trying to do a better job at that. Hopefully you will join us next Monday, bright and early, but it's not bright and early anymore. Kind of. I guess it depends on when you wake up. It's 1 p.m. for Mountain Standard Time, noon for the West Coast, and 3 p.m. for the East Coast. Come and hang out with us, talk about art stuff and all the stuff related to art stuff. And if you have anything you would like to chat about in these sessions, go ahead and put that in the comments. We will check those out and put them into the pool for potential topic conversations. And maybe we'll do an AMA pretty soon and just kind of open things up for asking and see what folks have going on. So until next time, go make something amazing and maybe ask yourself a few of those questions. Is it worth doing, even if I can't make a living out of it? You might find some interesting answers at the end of that. All right, everybody, you're incredible. Go do amazing things, and we will see you next week.